Tuesday, March 20th. It's noon, and this is the regular board meeting of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. And call the meeting to order and begin as we usually do with introductions so that anyone who listens to the tape will know who's talking. I'm Carl England, board member.
Nancy May, board member.
Melanie Brock, board member.
Ellen Buchanan, MRA staff.
Leslie Pugh, MRA staff.
Go ahead.
Lee Einsweiler with Cook Studio, working on with Winter and Company.
Val Means with the Development Services Planning section.
Joe?
Jill Dunn, MRA staff.
Yes, sir?
Kyle Gochi, DJ and engineering.
Erin Vian, Office of Housing and Community Development.
I'm Nori Winter, Winter and Company. I'm Jeremy Keene, WGM Group.
Trevor Hyman, WGM Group.
Brad Johnson from Winter and Company.
Chris Bean, MRA staff.
Tasha Jones, MRA board.
Bob Moore, taxpayer.
Okay. February 15th, 2018 minutes. Any corrections or additions?
I move approval as submitted.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. Any public comments or announcements of matters that are not on the action item agenda? We'll deal with the comment on action items when we get there. From anyone?
Can I ask a question?
You can ask a question, sure.
I asked the director 2, 3, 4 months ago for a copy of the appraisal of the park to be built. And you said you didn't have it and couldn't provide it. I'm wondering if you got it now.
I do.
Could I have a copy of it?
If you'll do a formal request, I'll be happy to provide it to you.
So you do have one now?
Yes.
Okay, anything else? All right. Missoula Design Excellence Projects. Who's gonna introduce this? You?
Sure, unless Lavelle wants to. So this is a project we embarked upon last year, I guess. MRA has a significant amount of funding in this project, and the consulting team has been here, I think this is the 3rd visit. And we wanted, there are a whole series of presentations being made over the course of the next 3 days, and we wanted to get them in front of you to do a presentation for the MRA board and staff so that we could ask questions that are specific to what we wanted to accomplish as a partner in this endeavor. So that's why we changed your board meeting date and week and to match Nori's schedule. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Winter and Company to walk you through kind of where we are, where we're headed, and leave time for some discussion and questions. Because I know we've been interested in our corridors and some of the urban renewal districts.
Okay. Who's up here?
Hi, thank
Brad.
you. Can I flip this thing with that, or just click it?
You should be able to.
I think we can get you the keyboard if you'd like.
It works.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, well, thanks for making the time. It's important here to talk to you, and I think of the things that Ellen discussed, most of it hopefully can be discussion, so I'll try to move through this quickly, but feel free to stop me if you need to. High level intention of the project is that I think community began to feel that there were a lot of great projects coming to the city. There's evidence of that all over downtown and a lot of different places, right? And they said, we'd like to see more of that. And then, on the other hand, there were some projects I think that people were struggling with that just didn't feel like they quite fit the Missoula character or were unique enough to fit in this place and looked like they could have kind of been plopped down in any city across the country. And so we were engaged to help the city run a project to really engage the community about what they valued in terms of private development within the city, what they defined as excellent design. And with the goal being eventually, and this is sort of where we're at now, to take their input, develop a strategy, and eventually some regulatory and incentive-based tools to address design excellence in private development. And so where we're at now in the process is we have some of those tools drafted, and we're presenting those to the community this week, and they're out for comment through April 3rd. Okay. Just a little background. Our focus areas were lots of the commercial corridors, not every single one, but most of the commercial corridors. You'll see this map over here on the left. Kind of highlights some of the key streets. A lot of them you guys are interested in, of course. Brook Street is there, North Reserve is there. Parts of Russell Street are there as well. The focus in those areas were on non-residentially zoned parcels. So we're talking about commercial parcels. Some of those, of course, do allow residential, or maybe most of them, or all of them. And downtown is the other key area of focus. So just a little bit of background in some of the terminology you'll hear me using. We talk about tools to address design excellence. Well, there are design standards and there are design guidelines. Design standards are prescriptive, measurable parameters that you would follow to build your building. You may be familiar with a lot of these in the zoning ordinance now. How tall can the building be, and how far does it have to be set back from the property line, and so on. And it's pretty clear cut. You either meet the standard or you don't. The design guideline, on the other hand, is a little more flexible. It's a discretionary tool that really focuses on the design objective. And then there may be 1, 2, 3, or 5, 6 ways to meet that design objective. Now it's discretionary, so it requires somebody to administer it, either a staff person to determine that a project has met the guideline, or in some cases a design review board might be in charge of reviewing that. So just an example, I mentioned the setback one, 5 feet, your building has to be set back. A design guideline might say, design the area between the building and the street to enhance the pedestrian experience. And now you see these two pictures, these are both pretty nice pedestrian experiences, but they're pretty different too, right? So that's what I mean about flexibility and more than one way to skin the cat in meeting a singular design guideline. So we've had a lot of outreach. We're going to have our 3rd community workshop on this project tonight. We've had several meetings with Planning Commission, I think, and City Council, and check-ins along the way. We heard a lot about what people valued, what their overarching principles were, or hopes for design in Missoula, and they also helped us understand how their objectives may be different based on a location. You know, downtown is not the same thing as Brook Street corridor, is not the same thing as Reserve, and so how did their vision for design in those different areas change? That led us to development of some context in the case of downtown. So you see several different colors on this map. Inner downtown core, outer core, the hip strip area, some of the gateway areas at the edge of downtown, and in purple this downtown north area, which is kind of a mix of residential and a little bit of commercial in there. Some of this was also informed by the downtown master plan, of course. So in that area, you know, that's a pretty robust plan, so we tried to build on that as much as we could. Just keep these colors in mind. So the chart to the right is a summary chart of what the vision is for design for some of the key design variables for each of these downtown contexts, right? Took a similar approach with the corridors. So again, color-coded and thinking about, you know, for example, the top is pedestrian activity level. It's expected to be very high as the vision of the Brooks corridor plan lays out, right? So the purple one is very high, whereas typology 4, Reserve Street, maybe won't be quite as high a level of pedestrian activity, and that's a factor to think about in eventually putting together design standards and guidelines. So with that basic strategy, what we're coming to you with today is a design excellence overlay program, if you will. And this is something that is an addition or sits on top of Title 20 zoning ordinance, which is already in place, right? And sometimes it's addressing new design variables that the community told us were important that weren't addressed in the zoning ordinance. Sometimes it's trading or superseding the standards that are already in the zoning ordinance. And it breaks down to two different pieces: overlay design standards, one document of standards for downtown, and then a separate document for the corridors. And then a design excellence manual, which is those discretionary, kind of more squishy type guidelines, right, that require interpretation. So these are just pictures of the covers here. And so the design standards, or overlay design standards, are like zoning. Every project, regardless of where it is, it's going to be part of Title 20 in some form. It'll probably, of course, will get tweaked as we hear comment on it, but presumably some version of these overlay standards will get adopted as amendments to the zoning code, right? So they'll apply to all projects. The design guidelines, and we'll share this with you in a little bit more detail, they may only apply in some areas or to certain projects of certain size or projects that are receiving assistance from MRA. So we can talk about that in a little bit. Now, one thing to point out here is that for a project, let's say, that is only required to meet the prescriptive design standards, the overlay standards, but has an idea that meets the intent of the design standard, but is maybe not quite to the letter of the rule there. We've worked in a piece of the system that's called alternative compliance, would allow you to, as an applicant, to do something a little bit different than what's specified in the zoning ordinance, but you would move into the design guidelines and have to go through that discretionary design review process. So it incorporates some flexibility in that way. This is an example of one of the pages from the downtown overlay standards, which is talking about building height for portions of the building that are right up against the street, and minimum, floor to ceiling height on the ground floor to make a adequate retail space. So, these are pretty technical, they're pretty number heavy, and they're what you would expect to see in a zoning ordinance with graphics like this and numbers. And again, notice the colors there, different numbers, different rules, different requirements for different downtown contexts or corridor typologies, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all approach in the overlay standards. So it responds to context in different locations in that way. This is an example page from the commercial corridor standards that is looking at minimum glazing on the ground floor or transparency that would be required. Design Excellence Manual, or the design guidelines, breaks down into 4 different parts. The first part is a basic introduction to the document. Second part and third part are a piece on downtown and a piece on the corridors, all within this one document. For each of those, there's an introduction, which really lays out that vision for design in downtown, or in case of the corridors. Then getting into the specifics of the section on site design, so parking design or the location of the building on a site, and then ultimately building design, so how you design your facade or the entry to the building, things like that. And then a sign chapter that is across the board, or this part 4, sorry, it's not a chapter, but that would apply to downtown and the corridors. Just an example of some of the elements that are addressed in the site design section, so give you a sense of that. That's not the full list, but that's a pretty good sample. But it's pretty comprehensive, covers a lot of topics, the design guidelines do. example of a sign. So everything from how you integrate a sign with the building appropriately, how you use lighting in a sensitive way to illuminate a sign, materials in the sign, how that relates to a building or site, and some guidelines for specific sign types that you guys are going to encounter. So this is a table that summarizes the recommended applicability for design review. Again, with discretionary guidelines, discretionary design review. So this is really important piece of this whole system. So let's see if I can get this. So what we're saying right now is design review required for all projects in downtown. All projects have got to meet these overlay design standards, regardless of where you are, remember, but all projects in downtown have to meet also the design guidelines. Same thing for corridor type 1. So if you look at the map, that's again Russell Street, that north part of Russell Street where a plan has been done, as well as the Brook Street corridor where that master plan was done. All projects require design review. These other corridor types 2, 3, and 4, they require design review, but only if you meet or you surpass a certain threshold of size of square footage, which in the case of corridor type 2, which is this orange colored one, it's 8,000 square feet. Corridor type 3, moving up to 15,000 square feet. So now we're talking about the size of a Walgreens or something like that, 15,000 square feet. To out on reserve, it wouldn't trigger till 30,000 square feet. So that's getting to be a pretty good sized building, right? Otherwise, you would just meet the overlay standards and you wouldn't be required to go through discretionary design review. Now, in addition to those thresholds though, what we're also saying is that if MRA is providing assistance to a project, you're going to go through design review. So that's where we're at right now. We can talk about the details of that with you guys. It sounds like there's something to learn there, but as a general concept, that's what we're saying, right? And as I mentioned before, projects that can't or don't want to meet the letter of the law of these standards can have an option to opt into design review and come up with an idea that still meets the intent of those standards. So, what would this look like in terms of process? I'm just going to get up real quick for this one. So, first of all, you may not be within the purview of this overlay system at all. And so this first bubble up here, which you guys probably can't see, says determine if the property is in the overlay. Well, if it's no, then you go through the same process you would today. You check with the base zoning standards. If you pass go, then you go get your building permit. If you are within the overlay, you can determine which of these bubbles or which of these colored corridors you're in. You're going to review your project with the overlay standards, which again apply to all projects. You're going to see if you're matching with them or not, and then you're going to determine if design review is required. So are you receiving money? Are you within one of those key corridors we described? Are you over the certain threshold of size, etc.? If you are, you're going to enter the design review process. You're going to submit an application for a review of your design. This is a review period which could be done by staff. We think it's probably going to be done mostly by staff, but it could also be by a design review board, and that could be potentially, there's still some to work out here, you can tell by the language I'm using, but that could be by request of the applicant. I want to go to a design review board, in addition to staff or whatever, or the staff could say this is a really controversial project, it's at a key location. Let's get the design review board to weigh in on that. So we can talk about that a little bit more if needed. And at that point, if you didn't receive approval for design review, you would essentially revise your project design and come back through the process. If you did, then you're off to building permit, right? So that's a pretty quick overview. any of that we can go back to, or we can just get into some discussion now. Anything else you guys would add there?
No, I think you, I think you covered it, Brad. Of just the idea of these. Maybe can you go back to one of the tables? Is that they are, you know, again, what we heard was one size does not fit all. We need to be more context sensitive with design. So we've identified what in downtown are being called contexts, and then in the corridors are being called typologies. And by doing that, we can have different standards or have the numbers change by context, so that we can, in some cases, ask buildings to come closer to the street, but in other cases allow them to be set back farther, knowing that that's in response to the character of the street. That we have taken the neighborhood plans into consideration where they exist in terms of what the community has already said is the vision for that area. And otherwise, we've worked from the vision statements that came out of some of the workshops. So to the greatest extent feasible, this is allowing us to tailor the vision and the requirements to these different settings. And it allows change, it allows the system to learn. Once this is adopted and we learn that maybe an 8,000 square foot threshold in a certain area isn't right, we need to change that to 10,000. It's an easy change and the system remains intact. And so that structure is very important to the way it's set up as well. And it is balancing the degree to which you can have these predictable prescriptive standards with discretionary review based on where is it most important to have that finer grain level of review using guidelines. And while guidelines may be a little bit less predictable, they're also more flexible. And so in many cases, the development community will find that they've got more options available through design review than they might have today. It's important to recognize that right now, for a lot of the corridors, there already are standards that set forth some prescriptive requirements, like the amount of glass that's required or build to, but it's one size fits all. It doesn't take into consideration that I'm in a purple, orange, or red corridor. So this is a refinement and actually an improvement over what the current regulations provide. So with that, questions, comments?
Questions, comments?
When are you going to decide the process for design review? Sounds like that's in flux, but.
In the details.
Yeah.
Well, we need to talk about schedule a little bit more, but I think on the long end, what we're shooting for is a meeting with the Planning Commission to make a recommendation on this whole project in September. So that would definitely need to be worked out before that meeting.
I mean, that's a good question. What we're talking about is how to balance efficiency and predictability with, you know, having opportunity to really have a complex project looked at. So on the one hand, we want it for it to be quick and easy. Staff review is the appropriate level. And but there are times when a project is really complex, or I'm not happy with what staff is saying, and I want to ask for the comment. But the idea is right now that the authority in the decision making would be with the planning director, basically, and they would seek the advice of the design review board as opposed to the design review board being the decision making body. Now, there are lots of communities who do have their review board make the formal decision, and that can be done, but that means, you know, the hearing time, the scheduling time, it just adds a little bit more step. But that's one of the things we want to find out is how comfortable is the community about administrative permitting versus having a board make the decision. So those are the variables that we're discussing and talking with staff about, you know, what's their capability, what's the workload going to look like. All of those are very practical kinds of things that we're having to think about. So I don't know if some of you have your personal opinions about whether you want a judge or a jury.
You got a fair number of attorneys in there.
What are the guidelines and standards, have you developed those specifically?
Yes.
Yeah, those are available online. That's what he's holding up our.
Yeah, so if you go to MissoulaDesignExcellence.org,
Yes.
you'll have the guidelines, the 2 sets of standards, and if you don't have time to read 200 something pages, there's an executive summary there for you. It's about, what, 12 pages, something like that.
Easy read. It's got a lot of graphics.
That is kind of at the level that I just talked about, but if you need a refresher, it has a little more detail than that though. It's a quick summary.
And do you anticipate that those will be rewritten by council or the planning board at some point in the process before they're adopted? Or do you anticipate that they would be?
Well, they're being presented to the public this week. There's a comment period. We will receive comments and make revisions. And also, because of it, we're having a lot of work sessions with staff over these next couple of days. So there will be some edits made prior to their going through a formal adoption process. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but did I understand you right that that the standards are the existing standards?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, they're new tailored standards for these areas and based on the community input, and they would either replace or supersede the standards in the base zoning in Title 20 that exist right now.
Yeah. The idea of a zoning overlay is that for those areas where the overlay doesn't exist, the base zoning remains in place because we're not touching every place where there's a commercial zone district and a corridor in the city. These were the ones that were identified in community workshops as the ones people were most concerned about character. So that's why you don't necessarily change the actual underlying zoning because there's some places we're not addressing. But an overlay typically supersedes what's underneath it, but it doesn't necessarily change everything. So for example, there is a landscaping requirement, a percentage of landscaping that's in the base zoning. We're not touching that number. But the guidelines do talk about is what's the quality of that landscaping, what does it look like, but the square footage requirement remains the same. So in some cases, it's enhancing what's already there, but in other cases, it's changing a measure that is in the underlying base zoning. Right now, there's a height limit that's established in these areas that's pretty high for many of the corridors. In community workshops, people said, that's okay, but really at the street front, we want to see something a little bit lower in scale. And so there's now a frontal zone area where the building height has to be a little bit lower. Your overall height limit remains the same. It's not touched, and that's in the underlying zoning. But there is this added requirement within the first X feet of the front along the street. So that's how an overlay standard supersedes the underlying one. So it's a mix of those kinds of interactions with the base zoning.
Helen, does the council or the planning board, will they adopt the guidelines that are applicable to the MRA projects, or would we have to?
Well, I think the guidelines or the standards will be adopted by the council.
Okay.
And I think one of the suggestions that's on the board is that any project that receives funding, no matter whether it's for something to do with a building exterior or a sidewalk or a water line extension, would need to meet those standards if it wasn't in a zone that already required it to. So is that a fair characterization? Right. So I think that's a kind of philosophical thing that we need to look at, and I think it's fair. I mean, tax increment money is not an entitlement, it's an enhancement. And if we believe in the standards that are adopted, then, you know, if you want funding to offset some of your costs that are legitimate expenses under state law, then you have to comply with a higher standard design than might be required just by the zoning. And that's something we've never had, particularly for the facade program. And
Right, but then the
we-
question, the flip side of the question is there somehow or another, does that make it more of an entitlement?
Does that make it
More of an entitlement.
I hadn't thought about that. I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I don't necessarily believe that just because you're meeting a design standard, you're entitled to the funding.
Okay.
I mean, because you may be coming in and doing something that disrupts existing land use patterns, or, and I'm not talking about urban design, I'm talking about somebody comes in and they rip out a bunch of affordable housing and put back high-end housing, and they're gonna meet all the design standards, so they want us to pay for demolition and blah, blah, blah. That's maybe not meeting our goal.
No,
And that's just an off the top of my head example.
well, and I think it's acute because we want to make sure the language, when we're saying you would have to go through design review in order to get the MRA assistance, that approval of design review is not the same as approval of the assistance. You still have your criteria for, is this a community benefit? Is it, all of those things remain in place. So we want to be certain we get that language clear, so we're not confusing people. Laval, did you?
Yeah, and just regarding the design standards, the idea with those would be they're going to be a requirement already. So that means that I think funding requests from the within an urban renewal district would be able to move beyond that and look at the design guidelines for those extra enhancements, and you're less having to wrestle with requests that are about building placement or the kinds of things that are covered in the standards that they should be doing already. So you can focus more on the discretionary and the additional qualities of the building design that come through out of the design guidelines. So I'm just trying to create that distinction for you. The standards are the things that are going to be a requirement. We're looking at them from development services. Design review is the discretionary piece that is the added qualities, and keeping those terms the same. They're distinct.
Yes, Nancy.
So if the guidelines apply to a project, then is that something that MRA staff is going to be doing, or is that something that planning is going to be doing, so that the planning department will have to work more closely with MRA and give us an opinion, somewhat like we work with the road department on priorities for some projects or that sort of thing, or will we need to have additional staff? I guess I'd like to know how it's going to work together.
Well, I think the mechanics will be kind of worked out in the process, but I don't think it means we need additional staff. We have review processes and procedures in place already. Anybody who's going to build a new building and comes to us for assistance has to go through zoning compliance review, and so that system's already in place. This just takes it to a higher level, I think. But the design review and these tools will be implemented by development services.
But it does raise a question, and we've talked about this a little bit, that procedurally we want to be certain that MRA has the opportunity to comment during that design review process, so you're not just handed that decision of, staff has said it's okay, and now you're sitting here thinking, well, I'm not sure, we're so happy with that project.
We kind of don't let that happen.
Right, yeah. Well, I know you wouldn't. But no, we want to, that is a procedural thing that we're aware of.
Well, and we've got the design review team in place. MRA is a part of that team if there's a project that's in a district or affects one of our districts. And I think either that or a similar mechanism will be used for this. I do have one question though. Will you be making recommendations as to what the composition of a design review board might be in terms of qualifications?
Yeah,
Whether it becomes mandatory for everything or discretionary?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good.
But regardless of whether there's a design review board, it still has to, anything that gets funding has to come through here
Yes.
and requires our approval on something like a facade improvement of this specific project. Correct?
Yeah, and that actually raises a good point, is that a facade improvement probably wouldn't be triggered for some of the level of design review. So you actually get a chance to get down to some projects that this system wouldn't necessarily cover. We're still trying to figure out exactly what that threshold is for alterations to the skin of a building or not. If you're only were doing your facade, would this design review kick in is still something we're trying to figure out.
But even if it doesn't, from the standpoint of development services, we've got the standards and it can
Exactly.
kick in order to get funding.
Right.
So that's where, that's where we're getting the tool we need for those projects that wouldn't necessarily have to go through this
Right,
flow chart that Brad went through.
exactly.
Okay, but we haven't seen the tool. I take it you've seen some of it. Are you comfortable with it as?
I need to look at it more, but yeah, I think so. I think we're headed where we need to. And I think this is still a work in progress. It's going to continue to evolve over the summer based on comments of the spring and summer. Based
So
on-
this is a non-action item today,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you have to say bring it back again as an action item with recommendations?
I think there could be portions of it that you may want to take some action on. I don't think you necessarily have to. I think what we would do as an agency is understand which pieces of this are the standards that we're going to want to apply if a project is going to receive funding, and adopt that as our policy.
Right, we're gonna.
Just as we adopt,
Right.
just as we adopted deconstruction as opposed to demolition as a policy.
Yes.
It's the same kind of thing.
So, in talking about the continuing process, what is the path to getting this to the city council? And when the city council considers it, are they adopting it like they would adopt the downtown master plan as something they're gonna look at? Or is it gonna be an ordinance, or what's the enforcement?
Should I take that?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
changes
so
zoning.
the design standards, the overlays will be in an ordinance, ordinances that sit inside Title 20, and they will make reference to the requirement to follow the design guidelines based on those thresholds that you saw. It requires going to planning board for their recommendation, and then on to city council for their final approval as an ordinance. The design guidelines themselves may not need the detailed review of a planning board and city council, because they're going to be operating with a little more flexibility. So I think that kind of covers some timeline pieces.
So,
We are
what
applying
time-
this, I'm sorry.
Okay.
that-
So, like, when may it be effective?
The timing that we're looking at right now, I think, is collecting the comments and developing a final draft, a final product and draft. And it's going to eventually require not just the overlay standards that you see and that is online right now, but also ways into looking at the design review board, so changes to other chapters in our code. And it is also going to require a mapping project that applies these overlays to the particular areas that you see over here. We're thinking that that final review draft, the final ordinance language that we would be taking to planning board, is something we could be doing around by about September, is what we're hoping for. Planning board, after their review, we're probably talking more like October by the time you're taking it to city council, and then I can imagine it taking a few LUP meetings and then a hearing date. So 30 days after it is approved by council, it becomes effective. That cover the mapping piece too, yeah.
Okay, anything else? Well, oh,
I would think at some point in the process that the board would like to be involved in having the staff at least make a presentation of the sections of this, of this plan that we may be using.
right, the guy.
Yeah, the guidelines, so that we can have an opportunity to comment.
Right. And it sounds like that needs to be something that's done before it goes to planning board, so that if we have a problem with the guidelines. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think what makes the most sense is to see what kind of comments are generated through this series of presentations. I'm sure there'll be technical comments from staff and there'll be general comments from the public, and how those modify where we are today. And then we'll take a deep dive into it and bring something back to the board and probably just do a workshop.
On just the guidelines or the whole,
The pieces that will impact
okay,
our actions.
does that make sense?
And I'd be interested in understanding better what you're trying to capture that wouldn't already go through this process by saying anything that asks for MRA funding would have to join
Right.
voluntarily into the process. I guess I'd like to know, what isn't already going in that direction, and what are you trying to capture, and is that really something that we want to do? I guess my concern would be that bigger projects probably are going to fit within this already, and smaller projects, I wouldn't want to create so much procedure that it adds expense and administrative steps that would be, that would prevent some of these smaller projects from going forward. That would be my reaction anyway.
And I think, if we look at the projects that were catalysts for this effort, if there isn't something outside of what MRA has to offer that requires them to behave properly in the community, they'll just tell us they don't want our money and they'll build whatever they want to build, just like we got on Broadway. They're in an urban renewal district. We beg them to let us pay for all of their demolition and site work in exchange for a better
More-
design, and
More
they
red
chose not to do
now?
it.
We wanted more red now?
I wanted more black because it didn't look enough like Darth Vader to me at all.
Well, and so,
Yeah, right.
not to name names, but the base code
What was the
will-
first picture you put up?
is now saying, because one of the things we heard, and this is one that's important for people to know about, is materials requirements. That what we've heard is we want things to speak of Missoula and not be generic. Well, how do you do that? People said we want to see materials that are more traditional, more native, etc. And so there is a requirement for a minimum amount of a limited palette of those kinds of materials that will start being repeated and being part of the image of Missoula. That would address some buildings that we might think of that have none of that right now. And so there are some that would be a part of the base zoning that would help to take care of some of that. So that is important to know, even if they now refuse MRA assistance, that at least that bottom bar has been elevated a bit. And there are a few of the other standards that address some of those same kinds of issues, so that even the little small drive-through or whatnot will be better under these standards.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming, and good luck going forward, and I have a feeling we'll be hearing from you again.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay, but you don't need to.
I'm gonna make just a little bit of noise taking this out of here.
Okay? Well, we'll give you a minute to
Till-
make,
Can you leave it for a little bit?
whatever you want to do.
While
Let's
they're
just leave it
shuffling
there.
around, well, it's not, okay, while they're shuffling around, I'm gonna call Annette. She wanted to be on the phone for her for 2 agenda items.
Oh, okay. we're running up against time.
Yeah.
Thank you for squeezing me in. Can you get that flash drive?
I want to go pay bills. But I don't have to carry that. Minimal. Minimalism is like.
I'm gonna stay for this other agenda item. You can swing by anytime. You can go back to the office. Yeah. Just send me a text whenever you.
Teenager at heart.
Right. We were talking about that earlier.
What do you mean?
I have a pop star.
Hello, this is Annette.
Hey Annette, we're getting ready to start on your first item.
Okay, please.
Okay, well, so the first action item is Montana Rail Link Park, and what were you doing with the playground first?
Yes.
Is that right? And Annette's on the phone because she had to be with her family, but you're gonna,
I'll do the presentation, and it'll be here to answer questions if
Okay.
anybody has any.
all right.
So, February meeting this year, the board approved a staff request to issue a request for proposals to select a contractor to design and provide the playground equipment for the MRL Park on Johnson Street. This is kind of a model that I think Parks has used in other parks that they've done, and it seemed to make a lot of sense. The board approved that request, and what's called a competitive sealed proposals. A request for competitive sealed proposals was issued. I think there were 4 responses to that request, and there was an evaluation team that was composed of Annette, Patrick and Neil from the Parks Department, and Eric Meadows, who's one of our landscape designers, the lead team. They all agreed on a proposal that was presented by, I think it's pronounced Grondel Recreation, in an amount of $162,960. The budget range for that playground equipment was $160 to $180. So we were pleased to see the preferred alternative come in well within that budget and under what it could have been. So the staff recommendation today is for the MRA board to approve Grondel Recreation Inc. as the preferred designer, contractor, and installer of the playground at MRL Park, approve a contract in the amount not to exceed $163,000, and authorize the board chair to sign the contract. And there's a graphic included in your package, and it's really a pretty fun design that picks up a lot on the railroad theme, and that was one of the parameters of this, so that's the recommendation. You have any questions?
Questions? Yes.
The contractor is also providing the equipment that's in the playground,
Yes.
and that's included in the $162,000.
It's a turnkey.
Okay, all right. And was this figure included in any of the previous funding for the park, or is it now coming out of the contingency?
No, it's part of the park design. That piece was just pulled out and done as a turnkey piece.
Okay, so it's already in the budget? Okay.
Okay.
I was just wondering about this. Is this like a rain shelter on the edge? The top right-hand corner? The shade?
It looks like the shade structure.
There won't be anything underneath it, it's just for...
It looks like there's equipment under it.
Oh, is it over
It
the...
looks like it's on the exterior, but it's hard to tell.
They're on the edge of the design, outside of the circle, if you will. There are proposed a couple of, they're sort of like open air trellis structures. And those would not be included in the playground particular, but they would, if they stay in the project, they would be just on the edge and give some sort of spatial definition and some filtered shade over on that edge.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
So this actual design that we're looking at has a railroad theme to it?
It does. In fact, it's got a train engine as part of the play equipment.
Okay.
And it doesn't show up in this particular graphic, but I can grab one really quick where it does.
Okay. I mean, that was my question, is whether MRL had an expectation that it would be more obviously train-like, and I'm glad that it does, so that really answers the question. And the color, you say in the memo, the color is going to be different? Or it may be a different
We
color?
don't know that we don't know that it will be different, but this, if there were a desire to have a different color scheme, or right now they just showed everything red, if there were a desire to have mixed colors or a different color scheme, they have the opportunity to do that, or the capability of doing that.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions? Motion?
Actually, one more question.
Oh,
So
sorry.
originally, we had approved a higher amount, right? We had talked about a higher amount.
We had a range of 160 to 180,000
In the
for
budget.
this in the budget.
Okay, and is there an potential that a contingency would be needed above and beyond the 163? Or,
I mean,
We don't expect,
no, go ahead, Annette.
yeah, we don't expect that there would be much contingency at all, because we've asked them in the proposal to, they know what the price of their equipment is, they know what the freight is, they know what the cost of their installer will be. And so in this particular case, there really aren't too many unknowns. The general contractor will do the earthwork underneath and pour the circle, the concrete curb around. So we really don't expect there to be much, this is a unique situation in construction that we don't expect there will be many surprises.
okay.
Okay. Anything else?
And this is a supplier that Parks and Rec, Missoula Parks and Rec has worked with in the past. And are comfortable with their work. Yeah.
All right. Okay, anything else? Motion?
I move that the MRA Board approve Grandal Recreation Inc. as the preferred designer, contractor, and installer for the playground at Emerald Park. Approve a contract in an amount not to exceed of $163,000 and authorize the board chairperson to sign the contract.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion, comments? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None? Let's go to the next item, which is construction survey and staking.
Yeah, so in December, when the MRA Board approved entering into a contract with DHM Design to design the overall park, we did not have our construction manager on board. So we didn't know where the staking and the surveying would live. And that can either live with the construction manager or it can live with your design team. We have since entered into a pre-construction agreement with Dick Anderson Construction, with the presumption that they will ultimately be the construction manager on the entire project. And the determination has been made that they would like for DHM Design to provide those services, primarily through DJ&A, who's the engineering component of the team here in Missoula. Annette got a proposal from the design team to perform those services in an amount of $27,840.50. A copy of that scope of services is attached to your memo, and the staff recommends that the board approve amending the original contract with DHM Design in an amount not to exceed $27,840.50 to include construction survey and staking services, and direct staff to issue the contract amendment.
Questions?
It's not an additional expense, it's actually just figuring out where it's going.
Okay. Questions from anyone? Annette, anything to add?
No, I think Ellen covered it quite well.
It's because you wrote such a good memo.
Thank you.
Okay. If not, motion?
I'll move that we accept the staff recommendation approving the amendment of the original contract with DHM Design in an amount not to exceed $27,840.50 to include construction, survey, and staking services, and direct staff to issue this contract amendment.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? Public comment? Not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. Moving right along. Thanks, Annette.
Thank you.
You want to jump off now or hang in?
I think I'll jump off.
I thought you might.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
All right, Holiday Village sidewalk. Again, Ellen, you're in charge. Todd is looking at colleges evidently.
Evidently. So this is a really long-awaited project, decades long. I think we've been trying to find a way to get an easement to put a sidewalk in front of Holiday Village on Brooks for a very long time. Excuse me. Sorry. So we finally have accomplished acquisition of an easement on Brooks and thank you. We've got an acquisition, we've got an easement. Holiday Village owners are going to take down the one building that's in the way, which is supposed to come down, I think, sometime this month, by the end of the month. They've got equipment out there as we speak. We advertised for bids for the project, and the low bidder was HM Concrete. They've done a number of projects for us in the past, a lot of the smaller sidewalk projects that we've done in the neighborhoods, HM has done. They were the low bidder in the amount of $132,460.35, and the staff recommends that the board approve awarding that contract to HM Concrete and authorize staff to sign the notice of award, notice to proceed, and the board chair to sign the contract.
Well, are they taking down that whole line?
No, they're going to take down
Tories?
the one where Pet Nebula most recently was.
Tories?
Yeah.
Tori's home cooking.
And then joint effort part of the building stays?
Stays. And we're not sure, I mean, there's evidently a pretty good demarcation line there that's steel, and we're not sure how they're going to skin that when they take it down. But that's
And
the
then
intention.
lease that, or
Well, they
remodel it? Or
They
what?
had plans to re-skin that whole thing, and the prices came in so high that they're not moving forward with their original proposal, so I'm not sure what their intentions are now. They're working with Oz Architects on what to do there. But that'll all be rental property, just as it's been for many decades.
Right.
How does this bid amount compare with other sidewalks along Brooks there? Is it reasonable?
It is. I mean, I think especially considering the scale of the project, it's a pretty small project, and you're going to pay a little bit higher price per square foot or per square yard, if you would, just because mobilization costs the same whether you're building 4 blocks or, several hundred feet. So we've compared it to the other projects that are going on, and it is reasonable, and we're starting to see prices increase
Okay.
on everything.
Does the easement now require that there's any setback, or will any building adjacent to the sidewalk be as close as the dental building that's a block further down, where it's just the sidewalk and then the building is right there at the edge?
I'm not sure what the zoning requires there, I haven't actually looked at that, but I would hope that there would be some setback. I don't even know if they're planning on building back
Okay.
in that location.
Do you know?
So, well, one of the things that's in the design guidelines, in the design standards for the overlay, is to provide a greater depth where there's not enough sidewalk room. That's one of the things we added to that design standard. So, once those overlay standards are approved, we'll have that. I think right now, today, there's no setback requirement. They can build right up to that easement.
Bring back Tories. Okay, anything?
Can I
Yes.
And this was not budgeted. It's not in the budget, it's coming out of contingency for Earth 3.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? If not, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the staff recommendation to award the construction contract for the Holiday Village Sidewalk Project to HM Concrete in the amount of $132,460.35. Authorize the MRA Board Chairman to sign the contract and authorize staff to sign the notice of award and notice to proceed.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
Okay, any further discussion? Public comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Thank Todd for moving this on. Council, I mean, this involved everybody, didn't it?
It was a battle.
Right, okay. Bird 2 Wyoming Street Reconstruction Project.
So at the July meeting last year, the board authorized staff to do a request for professional services to design another segment in our ongoing sidewalk projects on South 2nd Street. But prior to issuing the RFP, we became aware that with the Russell Street project moving forward, there's a section of Wyoming between Russell and Prince and
California. Yeah, California.
well, but there's a section that will, of water line extension that's going to be included, and the section of the street is going to be rebuilt between Russell and Prince as part of the Russell Street project, correct?
Yes, correct.
So, and there's a need to do a
Russell
major...
and what?
You meant California.
No, I-
That green section is being reconstructed with the
Exactly.
Russell Street project.
That's what I'm trying to say,
Sorry.
if I could do my report. So,
Section of Wyoming between Russell and
Russell,
Prince.
yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
so there's a
That's
water
for the
line
Russell Street
extension.
project.
Right,
Yeah, and there's a water line extension that needs to be made down Wyoming Street because to get the coverage that we need, there's a water line that's gonna have to come out, as I understand it, or be discontinued, that's up where the trail is gonna go under Russell. And so in order to be able to take that out of service, a new water line has to go into Wyoming and loop back up. Since the street was gonna be torn up with the water project, it seemed to us that it made sense to go ahead and piggyback on that and build Wyoming Street the way it needs to be built between Russell and California. It's already, the first block of it is on the west is already gonna happen as part of the Russell Street project. So we switched gears and decided to hold off on doing anything on South 2nd Street and shift our emphasis to Wyoming. Public Works Department already has a contract with WGM Group to design this water line. And what made the most sense was to go ahead and do a memorandum of agreement with Public Works Department / Missoula Water to layer on, if you will, some TIF funding to go ahead and rebuild the street the way it should be rebuilt rather than just patching it back. Because there's sidewalk that's going to be disrupted, there's pieces of sidewalk out there, not much, granted. And we just don't have an adequate street, and obviously what we built through the old sawmill district, from the railroad trestle to California Street, is a major east-west connection, and then we have this disconnect west of there as you continue on Wyoming, and we're going to get a traffic signal in Wyoming as part of the Russell Street project. So we are recommending that we shift gears at this point, not do the Second Street project, take advantage of the work that's already going to be done out there, have Wyoming Street disrupted one time for both of these projects, because the water project is not going to rebuild a proper street. It just fixes what the water causes to be disrupted. And that we enter into an agreement with Public Works to amend the WGM contract to include design services for the redesign engineering of that street segment.
Just
And-
design or construction?
No, this is just design.
And construction admin.
Yeah, but we would.
But not the cost.
But not the
Not the
cost.
cost. Right. And I don't know whether we would be looking at Dick Anderson Construction, who's doing Wyoming Street, to price this and do it, or whether it would be bid. That's gonna be Public Works' decision. But this gets the design done.
Dick Anderson's gonna do the first block in
Right.
Knife River, and then, yeah, the pink section up there,
Right.
I'm not sure, I think that would go out to bid, and it would be an
Right.
open bid. MDT is paying 75% of the water main costs all the way to California.
Right. So we've taken it from just a water main project to go ahead and rebuild the street.
So
Get side curb gutter
So
sidewalks.
MDT's gonna dig it up and put in a new main and then put it back the way it was,
Yeah, patch it back.
right?
And we're saying, let's build the street the way it should be built, because we've known that's gonna be a priority as soon as the
With
Russell Street project
Sidewalks
came
and the
around.
whole shebang.
Yes.
Okay. So the neighborhood of the cost of the 3 blocks of street is what?
I don't think we've done any estimates on that. There's some complicated pieces to this. You've got an irrigation ditch that's gotta be accommodated. We have a swimming pool that's encroaching out into the right of way. We've got some interesting elements that are gonna come into
So
play
there'll be another request that will come back
for construction
for
costs, yes.
construction. But we,
Which is our normal procedure.
Right, but we
Yeah,
usually have
yeah.
some guessing.
but we do
I
have,
can give you an
Well,
approximate.
Trevor might be able to help us.
It should be, I mean, the road construction component is right around, for the pink segment, is around $520,000 is what we're estimating. And partially it's expensive because of not only installing curb and sidewalk, but we're also doing full road reconstruction. We don't know when the last time it was actually, the road base was built. We're also intending to pipe the Missoula irrigation ditch for that entire block in front of those storage units. And then the landscaping costs and installing lighting at California and Inez and I believe Prince, but I'm not positive on the Prince one. So at least at 2 intersections, providing the services and providing the conduit and pole boxes to ultimately do street lighting is what's estimated currently. And obviously it's preliminary and there's contingency in there, but it's around the 520.
But that's the order of magnitude,
Yes.
500.
Yes.
Which
And
is-
then water would be in
buy
addition to
part
that.
of that, or
We pay for the street there'd probably be some offset for what would have to be paid for as part of the water project.
Yeah.
But by and large, we're doing a tremendous enhancement out here. And if you look at what Mary Avenue from the tracks to Reserve Street cost, that was a $1.5 million project for roughly 3 blocks, where we went into an existing street and we reconstructed it right down to dirt. And this is what's gonna have to happen with Wyoming. And that way we actually get.
Now, is that all get timed?
Can you explain what you mean by time?
Well, I mean, is that all, will this all work to where it gets timed in some sort of a logical fashion with the reconstruction of Reserve Street and all of
So
that?
Russell Street's anticipated.
Or Russell, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Russell Street's anticipated to take 2 years. But the portion that's in blue of the water line that runs underneath Wyoming there that will be built with the Russell Street project is gonna have to happen immediately this spring. So it'll be coming right now. They'll do a small patch back, but that's all part of the Russell Street project. As this project continues, what we didn't want to have is 2 contractors trying to overlap on top of each other, number one. But then the timing of this, it just has to be done either directly after the Russell Street project or at the end of the Russell Street project so that it can be built and the traffic control can be kind of coordinated between the two contractors if that's the case. I think there's a sunset agreement potentially on the funding, but I'm not really sure for the water line component, and that's something Ross might be able to answer.
I'm not aware of any sunset component, but I better look into it. The timing for the water main, I'll just really quick look at this. Like was explained earlier, there's the underpass that's gonna go in, the Milwaukee Trail underpass that's gonna go in right here. And when they put that underpass in here, it's gonna wipe out this water main. And Missoula Water needs this water main to provide water on this side of Russell for this neighborhood. So the idea is that before they take this part of the main out, they're gonna build from here to here and tie in this portion of water main. So that's gonna happen this April. The rest of this can happen anytime, because then we'll already have this pathway for water to get over to here. So when this part of the water main happens, is we're not sure if it needs to happen this summer or next summer.
Yes.
So we're looking at funding from 2 separate fiscal years?
Sure.
And are we going to be asked to do work or pay for work on Dakota Street then too?
No.
With this project?
No, not with this project. I'm asking Ellen in the future, are we going to be doing anything?
Dakota's in pretty good shape.
I think Dakota's okay.
Okay, all right.
We've done that a lot at a time with the adjacent developments.
Okay, so this is just for design.
This is just for design right now.
Okay, and our memo says that construction is starting in spring of 2019. Doesn't seem to be the timeline we're talking about.
Well, the
right now.
water line has to be done this spring of 18.
Okay,
The street construction, they're not gonna turn the corner with the Russell Street project to get that first block of Wyoming until 19.
Yeah, potentially. We know that the underpass is gonna start this spring, and it'll take somewhere in the 8 to 9 month range to complete all the retaining walls. So we know that the water line from Prince 132 feet down Wyoming Street will have to be done this spring, but the remainder can happen anytime in the next couple of years.
okay. I understand that Public Works is, this is their project. But since it is a separate project, if it is a separate project, do we have a responsibility to do a separate request for proposals?
We don't. I talked with the city attorney about that, and he thinks, I mean, his opinion, and we've come up against this on other projects where we've already got a project in progress and we've got an engineer that's on board, maybe with another department with the city, that the prudent thing to do in terms of expenditure of public funds is to get the most economical project you can, and that's, and it's our opinion, and he shares that opinion, that this is the most efficient way to do this. And it is in no way an effort to circumvent any kind of procurement requirement.
Okay, and this is going to come out of contingency?
Right. Or was it Second Street budget?
Yeah.
Did we,
Jill?
So my recollection is we had a little bit of money left over in our California Street budget, which kind of has been morphed into this Wyoming Street. That was just for design and engineering. I think we've utilized that already, that portion, and we're higher than that on the design and engineering. Now, that was the kind of the preliminary phase of looking at Wyoming Street, what do we need to do? Now, as I understand it, we're looking at designing the actual street reconstruction for those 2 blocks as an amendment to the Public Works contract, which they're handling the other block.
so I think the short answer is that when you authorize staff to issue a request for proposal for design of Second Street sidewalks, we did not go forward with that, so there was never any
So
money
there's no money
budgeted to either pay for design or to pay for construction. That'll come in a subsequent request.
So the 100 comes out of
Yes.
the 1.6 contingency and the,
Yeah, and there was a little bit of money, as Jill said, left over in the California Street North, if you will, design, and we used that money to pay WGM to give us a scope of services, to kind of figure out what a preliminary design might look like, not just stuff, so.
That was the 10,812 on your budget report?
Yep.
Got it.
And then, has the staff considered when we might get back on track with the Second Street budget, sub-second?
I think we'll probably come to you next budget cycle.
Okay.
I mean, we've been really frugal with those projects in District 2 until, as we were trying to rebuild our taxable values and our revenue streams, and we're there now. So I think we can be much more aggressive with our sidewalk projects, just like we've been in District 3, because we have adequate revenue now.
Okay. Anything else? If not, can we have a motion, please?
I move that MRA enter into a memorandum of understanding with City Public Works in amount not to exceed $110,417 for design engineering. I don't understand, I'm leaving out construction services. For design and engineering for Wyoming Street reconstruction project and authorize the director to sign the MOU.
This would be for construction management services?
Yeah, not for construction, but to manage the,
Yeah.
It's for construction management.
Right.
Okay, I'll include that.
All right,
Second.
okay. Any further discussion? Any public comments? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, none. So we have a quorum and a right number of votes, so we move right along. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, are your folks,
we're good.
we're good?
We're good.
All right, so the next item is downtown master plan request for funding? No.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we've been
I lost my
talking.
agenda, so that's why I didn't know, and I can't.
Here.
Cash is good. Oh, it's in this stack somewhere, but,
We're good.
There we go.
All right, let's just stop.
all right. Downtown master plan update.
Finally to one of my items.
There we go.
So we've been talking about this for a while in my director's reports, and as you know, the Downtown Master Plan Implementation Committee has been steadily marching along for about 8 years now, implementing the master plan, and we've understood for the last couple of years that we were fast approaching the time when that master plan needs to be re-looked at and updated. Particularly considering the fact that it was created and adopted right before the recession. And a lot of things changed after the recession. So there are probably 5 or 6 of us that have been very actively soliciting private support for this effort. We did that the first go around, and it's a model that I think is a really strong model because if you've helped pay for one of these plans, you're invested in it, and it becomes a priority. And I've got to say that this downtown master plan is probably the most successful master planning process I've ever been involved in my career. When local government or state government or federal government writes a check to do a plan, it just doesn't have the kind of buy-in that this kind of grassroots efforts will have. And we've been incredibly successful with implementation of many, many pieces of it, and we've reached a point where we need to reevaluate and see where we go. So, and it's still a work in progress. One big difference this time, we very intentionally did not go to the city for any general funding for that effort. It really came out of the downtown support groups as an effort. Downtown Association, BID, we had a fair amount of funding in it. The Parking Commission had a lot of needs in terms of what they wanted to get out of that original master plan. So they were a significant funder, and then we had the whole private fundraising piece of it, where property owners and investors in downtown supported it. We've got kind kind of a list of things that we want included in this, and I think that list is still being massaged and modified in some ways, but the goal is to put together about $400,000 and get an RFP out probably sometime in May. Go through the selection process over the summer when it's not very productive around here to hold public meetings and try to engage people because everybody's up at the lake. And then go through the selection process, get our design team on board, and in the fall, begin in earnest the planning process. The private fundraising has been incredibly successful. Way beyond what I expected would happen. I thought it was a really ambitious goal, and I think we're going to hit $200,000. Now that does include $40,000 from BID, but BID is basically business or property owners taxing themselves. And the rest of it has come from people who either care about downtown, are invested in downtown, have major businesses downtown. All of this new development that you see, they're in as support. So the request to the MRA is for $75,000. A similar request will go to Parking Commission. Parking Commission will get a whole new roadmap out of this because they've basically done everything that was in the original parking portion of the master plan. And the City of Missoula will fill whatever gap is needed out of general fund monies. The mayor has committed to, he thinks that this is an important enough tool that's been used for so many big projects downtown that the city needs to be invested in it from general fund. So what I've suggested, if you choose to fund this, is that we actually have 4 different urban renewal districts that are impacted by this plan. Riverfront Triangle is one of those, and resources are scarce there, and what little resources we have are needed to move that project forward, and it's already basically master planned for that area. So I am recommending that we limit the funding to District 2, and that's Broadway, and that has tremendous needs and has tremendous redevelopment potential, particularly when Russell Street is completed. The Front Street Urban Renewal District and the Hellgate Urban Renewal District. The other thing that I believe we'll do is we will extend the study area for the master plan. Originally it stopped at Van Buren. We will extend that district to Missoula College. So that gets the whole Hellgate district in the planning area.
And who makes that decision?
That'll be made by the steering committee or the master plan implementation committee.
Okay.
We define the original study area, and I think there's consensus that absolutely we need to go ahead and extend it east because that's vital. And then the other thing that's going on is that
should our to get money out of the Hellgate URD, shouldn't we make that a
well, the Hellgate URD
condition
starts at Madison and goes east.
Okay.
So, if we extend it on down to the study area on down to Missoula College, then we get Eastgate in there, and we get Montech in there, and we get some properties that may redevelop over the foreseeable future.
Right, but my only question is that shouldn't if we go along with your idea of 50, 10, and 15, shouldn't that also be contingent upon the study area expanded to Missoula College?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good suggestion. So staff recommends that the board approve support for the downtown master plan in an amount of $75,000, with $50,000 coming from District 2, $10,000 from Front Street, and $15,000 from Hellgate urban renewal districts.
Okay. Questions? Are you, I mean, I know that our general authority is, we got lots of authority to plan, and so we're covered on that.
Yes.
But are you comfortable planning for the riverfront triangle piece without a contribution from riverfront triangle?
Yeah, we did first go around.
Okay.
It was actually in the hole then,
Right.
literally and figuratively.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's basically master planned already, and with the riverfront triangle plan.
Oh, that's right, you mentioned that.
Yeah, and so and the resources are pretty scarce. There is taxable value there now by virtue of the fact that all the Providence property is now taxed. We'll see some reduction in that when the buildings come down. But, and Stockman Bank is gonna be an infusion, it's in the,
Right.
it's in the district. So, my recommendation is based on two things. One, that the area basically is already master planned. And number two, I believe we need the resources that are there to move this hotel conference center project forward. Because there's always going to be something else that needs some money to get you to home plate.
What a shot.
What a shot.
Yes.
Could we have a brief description of what an innovation corridor is?
Briefly,
You might want to ask the university about
Or
that.
long, short or long.
I think where that vision is coming from is recognition of what's going on at Montech, the potential with Missoula College in that location, and then the campus, what's going on in the campus across the river with all the research and development things that are going on. And now there's an effort to build a technology campus on West Broadway, which then I think just logically says Broadway becomes this technology corridor between these two hubs. And the really cool thing about it is downtown is like the belt buckle of that corridor. And I think we've got a lot of interest especially in the downtown area by tech companies who have outgrown their space. They're growing faster than they anticipated. Some of them have come out of Montech, I think, and they're looking for space. They're looking for a place to be. And so I think we need to take a hard look at how we accommodate those businesses, because those are the ones we say we want to grow in this community. And you've got several that haven't been in their current space very long at all, and have already outgrown it and are looking for larger footprints. And with that, I'll defer to MEP because this is their business, not mine.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You nailed it.
You can get a more complete and passionate description from Mel next meeting. She's a big one on this. So it's the idea that there's some synergy here.
Right.
And taking advantage of it, particularly with maybe the city's participation on West Broadway, has a huge potential, particularly for companies that are looking for a place to start.
And how far down West Broadway does the plan update go?
The plan update goes to Russell,
Okay.
and it did originally.
Okay.
I mean, if it needs to go further, it might do that, but it gets strange because we start to dilute what we're doing. And we know that, whatever's going to go on West Broadway beyond Russell is going to be very different in nature than what goes on in downtown. And you could even argue that going all the way out to Russell is a bit of a stretch, but we felt like that was important 9 years ago when we did this. And especially because of the impact that Russell Street is going to have on downtown, and also to capture the old Sawmill District area that's redeveloping now, and how should it develop relative to downtown. So that whole area is in the planning area.
Okay, to Russell.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions? If not, can we have a motion, please?
I'll move approval of the contribution to the update of the downtown master plan in the amount of $75,000 with $50,000 coming from ERD 2, $10,000 from the Front Street ERD, and $15,000 from the Hellgate ERD, contingent on expansion of the study area to, west to east to Missoula College.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Any public comments? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, none? And last but not least, the Missoula Economic Partnership.
Yeah, so one of our partners in this notion of not only the downtown master plan, but the innovation corridor, is Missoula Economic Partnership. We've been working with them on the notion of this technology park, and also what happens with Montech and what happens with the work that's going on across the river on campus. With the opportunity that's presented by the executive director moving on, and the prospect of looking for a new executive director for MEP, it seemed to me, it seemed to the mayor and to the MEP board to be an opportune time to take a look at what were the goals that were set for Missoula Economic Partnership when it was created, and where are we in that, and are the goals still the same? Are the markets still the same? Are the businesses that we should be courting and trying to bring into Missoula still the same as they were in 2010? Jay Garner with Garner
Economics.
Yeah, did that original assessment, and he has given a proposal to do a relook at that and a reevaluation of what the market is, looking at what the kind of targeted industries should be. And MRA has been asked to help fund this study. So Jeff Fee, as interim acting director of MEP, has reached out to a couple of other entities to try to secure some funding. First Security Bank and First Interstate Bank are both going to be funders for this. I think the county's going to be a funding source. We know there's $5,000 from the county, and we're thinking there might be a little bit more from their TIF district, from their Targeted Economic Development District. We've got to retrain ourselves. And so what Jeff and I have talked about, and the mayor, is MRA and MEP splitting the balance of the cost of Garner's efforts, which at a maximum would be $25,000 each, but if the county's in for 5, we're down less than that, and if the county's in for 10, it just keeps going down. So $25,000 would be the maximum that would come from MRA, and we think it's probably 20. I have recommended that the funds come from the North Reserve Scott Street Urban Renewal District and from Urban Renewal District 2 in equal amounts. Probably because they're, well, not probably, but because they are the districts that will most benefit, I think, from the efforts of MEP as we move forward. We have tremendous potential in North Reserve Scott Street for a whole myriad of things, and then you've got this technology or innovation corridor in District 2 along Broadway. So that's the staff recommendation.
Anything to add?
No, you want to come to work for me?
She's 2 for 2. Hey, knock it off.
Sorry. No, she summed it up nicely.
Nah, you're not downtown.
That was out of order. Okay, questions? Yes.
What is the total cost of the work?
Yeah.
55,000.
And what amounts are First Interstate and First Security contributing?
5 and 5.
Okay. And Stockman's Bank isn't in on that?
I haven't hit Fay up yet. Is there a reason? No. I got Tom and Scott cornered at a.
Well, see, Scott's
Put the
name is on the
script
letter.
Yeah.
Scott would have been hard, but.
Yeah.
And I will say that MEP is one of the contributors to the downtown master plan as well.
Okay. But are you going to be approaching other major contributors or benefactor?
If we need
potential
to,
benefactors?
right now we don't have any calls out to them. I'm gonna be gone, but we're gonna be presenting to the MDA next week with an ask from the county, but I haven't asked anybody else so far.
Okay. Part of Ellen's memo says that we'd be looking for greater collaboration between MEP and MRA. That would be nice for us to have that. We had occasional, but not so that, I don't think that MRA felt involved in the MEP process or maybe able to contribute as we could, or if there were opportunities for collaboration there. Just as a comment. So I have a question on how was the earlier report used and applied? This is going to be an update, and so I don't have a good understanding of how the first report was used.
Sure. Well, let me address your first point, which was the collaboration. Ellen was much more pointed in her comments about the desire to have a more, and I welcome that. And so we've actually had a couple of discussions along those lines, and whatever MRA sees as the most appropriate mechanism for us to connect on an ongoing operational basis, certainly we are very, and we're going to start by making sure we literally just finished with an investor luncheon, and in the future we won't book an investor luncheon during an MRA board meeting because we'd certainly like for you guys to participate. We got a lot of good feedback from our investor community this afternoon as we hope to inform our next 5-year strategic plan.
And if I might jump in, we changed our board meeting. You were booked way before we changed the board meeting to this date, and we did that to have the folks doing the design guidelines and design standards do a presentation to the board. Typically, we would have met last week.
Okay. Secondly, the Garner report really was used as a catalyst to create needed change in our economic development efforts in Missoula. When I got here in 2006, when I walked the streets of Missoula and talked about economic development, it was met with a lot of pushback. And it wasn't until the collapse happened and we lost Stimson and Smurfit that we said, we as a community don't want to have the future just happen to us. We want to engage the right community leaders and be intentional about what we want Missoula to look like 5, 10, 50 years down the road. So what the Garner report did for us was it informed, number one, structure, and it also informed our priorities as it relates to the type of industry sectors we would go after, but also it helped inform other things like the business retention and expansion. Jenny said it very well today at lunch, which was, our best opportunity for economic development is helping existing businesses grow. And so it really helped us as a newly found organization identify our strategic plan and identify our strategic priorities. And now what we want to be able to do is go back and say, okay, this is what you said. How did we do? The market has changed, and what should we be thinking about as we go forward? Not just from an MEP standpoint, but really the board from MEP is interested in just stepping back and saying we're not necessarily wed to our historical structure. If MEP needs to look differently in terms of working with other organizations in the community that also touch economic development, we're amenable to looking at that. So literally the investor luncheon today was garnering feedback from the investor community on that particular front. So did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Okay. What area is covered by this report?
What areas?
The geographical area.
Oh, it's Missoula County. It's the entirety of Missoula.
Okay, so you're including Sealy Lake then?
Yes, it is in Missoula, yes.
Okay. Those are my questions. Carl?
Okay, anything else? I said this to Jeff in private, but Eddie says it's a great opportunity. It's a great, I mean, the timing couldn't be better. Things are going well. It's a good opportunity for you guys to be able to stop and catch your breath, as well as the change of leadership. And so, you know, my only question was, are we sure we fit within our statute when we do this? And I looked at that this morning, and I think it's ample. I don't think there's any question about the fact that this city can do this, and under the statute says that the city can give to us any authority to do it. So that was my only issue.
And we were contributors when MEP was created in the beginning. It was Best Place Project.
Right.
And we helped with startup funds then, 30,000.
Right.
So
It'd
we
be
get
nice
meetings
to, you know, it'd be nice to get from someone a presentation after it's all over what the report says.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
And I think more important than that, what your, I mean, we can read it, and we probably will, but what you guys, what your impression is, and where you think it takes you, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think the board's committed to the process of really not jumping to any conclusions and waiting till, number one, where I'm out talking to a lot of the organizations that are involved in economic development, but also talking just to business leaders in general, and just trying to get an idea if they've thought about different ideas around how MEP can function more effectively. We've got a lot of pieces that are working together better than they were certainly 8 years ago. But are there ways that we should be working together even more closely to leverage those to be more efficient and effective at the delivery of economic development? So that's a big piece of it. And then getting the Garner report. So I think we're going to use a process of getting that information coupled with the information we're getting from the community to inform what MEP looks like, certainly. So it's an important process for us.
And I think this process is going to help the MEP board understand what skill sets are most appropriate as we, as they look for a new executive director. And is the way the organization is structured today the most efficient organizational structure? Because there are some other options.
Okay, anything else from anybody? If not, is there a motion?
Well, I'm pleased to have that you're going ahead with this update and producing a 5-year plan, and I move that Emory Board approve up to $25,000 in TIF assistance to MEP for the Competitive Realities Report and Targeted Industry Strategy to be prepared by Garner Economics, with the funding split between ERD 2 and the North Reserve Scott Street ERD.
Second.
Any further discussion? Public comment? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None? Thank you. We look forward to hearing about this as it moves forward. I didn't ask you, what's the timing?
We should be getting a report at the end of May, but they're on April 11th, they're going to be holding some other focus groups, and certainly we'd like to have somebody from MRA participate in that process.
Okay.
I will be there.
Great, great.
April 11th. We got it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All
Appreciate
right. Staff reports?
That's me, I guess, on the budget reports. Just a couple things to point out.
Thanks.
We have a report for Hellgate.
Yeah.
So in one of Ellen's memos, you saw available the $61,000. That's what we have in cash. If you look at that Hellgate report, you'll see that's about half of what our anticipated total tax increment revenue is supposed to be for this year, which is at $122,885. Just wanted to point that out.
I have no idea where it came from. We'll take it.
A couple of things on the ERD 2 report. a change in the, again, from Ellen's memo as far as the contingency number. What I did was I did put that police facility, it's about halfway down in the public improvement section. We committed up to 1 million, to debt service, $1 million. And we didn't decide how we were gonna do that. We were gonna kind of discuss that internally. So I just put that in there. I wanted just to see what it would do, the contingency. Ellen and I have talked about doing a development agreement with the city and doing 250 over 4 years, and then if something comes up, that development agreement could be modified to provide additional monies for something that might come up, and so that's something we talked about today. So you might see that in the future, that number drops down to just, this fiscal year at 250. We just have to remember that, every year then for the 4 years, we would have an additional 250 committed. So that was the other. And then the other thing that came up, and I can let Ellen speak to that, was the North Reserve Scott Street approval that we did last month for the water main, or sewer main. I think that's changed, so I'll let her speak to that. But Palmer Street sewer main, that was under public project, you see halfway down on the North Reserve Scott Street. That was the 91,000, and I think Ellen has an update on that.
Yeah, that project was brought about because there was going to be a household waste drop-off facility put at city shops, and they were going to do, if you'll remember, they were going to do just a service line, and it made sense to us to just go ahead and extend a sewer main down what will be a street in that district. The health department has since decided not to do that project, or to do it somewhere else. So we're not going to put a sewer main in at this point. We'll do it whenever the street's built.
So we take it off?
We'll just take it off.
Or do we
The
keep it in
91
there
off?
as save for
I
when
think we'll just do it as part of a bigger project when we have something happening out there that
Okay.
drives that street.
So they're not doing the waste thing?
Nope.
Okay. Right.
Interesting, but.
Alrighty.
And I will tell you, Peter Nielsen is retiring. And he was really the driving force behind that household waste deal.
Okay.
So he's retiring the end of this month.
All right. Anything else?
Other than just as far as Earth 3, we have a lot of projects going on, and Ellen's still working on putting the bond information together. And she can provide you an update on that as far as the bonding for the MRL park and the MRL property and the extension of the Bitterroot Trail. And that will, when we get that settled, then that'll change a little bit of how that looks on that Earth 3. But
all right.
Yeah, we're working with bond counsel and with our financial advisors to work through what's going to be taxable, what's going to be tax exempt in that bond. Is the buying the property was fairly complicated because there were privately owned buildings on there, and it was privately owned land, and now it's publicly owned land, but still privately owned structures. So Dan Simmons is trying to figure out a formula to decide how much will be taxable and how much will be tax
Did
exempt
the
on the purchase
city
price.
negotiate with those private, have they negotiated lease agreements or anything?
The current lease agreements are still in effect. The drywall, JTS, the drywall business has moved out. Their lease expired in October or November, and we've been month to month since then, so they're out in a new location, I think out on Expressway. The church is looking potentially for another location. We're trying to work through how we deal with their building. And Can't Make a Dream's lease runs for the church's lease runs through 2020, but I think they want to move on with their lives since they won't be part of that location ultimately. Can't Make a Dream can be accommodated in a redevelopment there, and we've had discussions with them about that. So, and their lease extends beyond when Sheck's did. I don't remember when it ends. But, so we're working with all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for Jill, the two MRL projects that we approved today, that become separate line items.
yeah, so they are going to go into, so what I've kept is right now I have a 1.5 million for construction, which I think is what we had anticipated. So I do have to get with, Annette and Ellen and talk about like the contingency of or, just make sure that I'm accounting for that correctly. I heard that you asked the question, like, is this coming out of the main project budget? So then I probably will, break that out, because it's nice to track those specifically out of that 1.5. So like the staking services is coming out of the 1.5, the playground's coming out of the 1.5, so I'll just reduce that number. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks. And all of that will be bonded as soon as we work through this taxable, tax exempt.
And when is that going to occur?
I hope in the coming weeks.
Okay.
We're starting to zero in on what information we need for him. It's just not a straightforward calculation.
Gee, shocking.
I know. But we'll get there.
Yes.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. All right, anything else?
Well, I didn't get to a director's report, and I apologize, but a couple of things to bring you up to date on with respect to the legislature. We hosted the cities that are working through the League of Cities and Towns to develop this kind of TIF database and fact sheets around urban renewal districts and targeted economic development districts. And one of the things that occurred during the interim before the meeting here is there was a legislative audit that was performed around tax increment financing, and it essentially was an audit of the Department of Revenue and how they deal with TIF. There were a number of concerns about the audit when all of the communities and counties, cities and counties met here on March 1st. We spent a lot of time going through that audit and trying to understand what the impact.
Performance or financial?
Performance.
Okay.
And it actually was, the chapter on local government was very complimentary. It ended up saying we were all doing fine, doing what we were supposed to be doing, but the narrative was not as positive as the conclusions were. Had a number of recommendations for Department of Revenue, all of them, with one exception, extremely manageable, better communication, do a better job of letting people know what taxable values are, et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of this very positive report, the last recommendation was there are really no standards for judging the expenditure of TIF funds, so maybe the legislature should create some. And so the audit was
What do you mean there are
discussed.
no standards?
They want
You'd have to
performance
ask- They
standards
want
for
performance
each.
standards, like one size fits all
One
for
size
us in Miles City and, in Whitefish.
Performance standards on what?
What
How
the
well
TIF, what
you're
TIF
using
funds
TIF
are
funding?
being spent on, and I don't know.
Well,
None of us really
They're
know
really
what it means.
focusing in on increased property values, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
Which is not
Urban
the
renewal
point
district.
of urban renewal.
That we're supposed to be increasing property values or
That-
decreasing?
That they would
Increase.
mandate it, yeah.
Yeah, there was some lack of understanding in the process. But anyway, a number of us, Chris and I included, went to Helena, was that just last week?
Yeah.
Holy night. There was a 3-hour, actually ended up being more like 3.5-hour discussion of the audit with the Revenue and Transportation Interim Committee and the Local Government Interim Committee.
And?
No conclusions came out of it, so I'm assuming that the dialogue will continue.
Did the department concur in the recommendations other than the performance standards?
Yeah, pretty much.
Although Mike Kidd is Director of Department of Revenue, did say that there were a few other recommendations that weren't so specific to the impact local government that would require would require additional hours
staff.
and money. And right now, they've already decreased a lot of their divisions by quite a bit, and can't have more people doing more tasks. And so that will be another issue that Revenue and Transportation will probably have to pick up at their next meeting, is if they want to go that direction as far as asking Department of Revenue to do more, then how are they going to do that?
And what about, did the audit committee get involved?
It was in front of the audit committee the week before,
And,
and they accepted the audit, which means the audit can't be changed.
right,
And there are factual errors in the audit.
yeah, but, I mean, that happens with those performance
I
audits.
guess it must, I mean.
And they don't
now we
follow
have-
through on those, I mean, that you either,
We-
you concur or you don't, and then they move on.
I think what local government and to a certain extent, the Revenue and Transportation Committees want to do is to use that to spin off to new kinds of legislations and use that as a basis. There are a few members of those committees that want to review certain specific things, and they wanted to hear that from that audit. So I think that audit will be used as information
Right.
rather than just a statement of the condition of DOR. They'll use it to change or consider changes to the law.
And I think one of the intentions of this working group is that there will be an addendum, if you will, to that audit report that kind of presents the cities and counties' response to some of the things in the audit, particularly that may need to be corrected, because that's there in perpetuity. And if nobody says, well, actually, business improvement districts aren't created by a vote of the city, which they're not, but that's in there, that'll never go corrected.
We had that
That's a
experience
detail.
with the Board of Investments where they made a recommendation for a change in the makeup of the board based upon study that they relied on from an outfit out of Stanford. And there was, before they published their report, actually when they were researching their report, there was a V2 of that study that said, oh, people have misread this recommendation, and this is not what we're saying, but that's the recommendation they made. And we have that same problem, and it's come back at every legislative session. Somebody from the audit committee says, we need to change the makeup of the Board of Investments because our audit said so, and each year we gotta go there and say, your audit said so based upon this study, then they missed the update.
Yeah. So I think there'll be an effort to at least present some of the things that will be concerned to the practitioners. But the long and short of it is the audit was completed, it went to the audit committee, they accepted it, it was discussed at great length in front of the two interim committees, and discussion on urban renewal districts and TEDs will continue.
Okay, anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Pretty good shape, please.
anything else from anybody? If not, we're adjourned, thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, there is one thing that I want, doesn't need to be on the agenda or anything, but we're gonna try to pull together a call meeting the first week in April
Okay.
to take care of some stuff with MRL Park, and there may be one other item on that that has to do with these intersections that MDT is modifying down here.
Okay.
Just a heads up, Leslie.
An extra meeting just by telephone?
No, it'll just be it'll be a special meeting,
Okay,
but it's not at your regular time,
okay,
which I call called meetings.
okay.
If we could get a quorum, and if you all are agreeable.
We'll be a riverfront triangle update in the summer, I mean.
Sure.
And here's
They got
my,
18 months to raise.
I know, I just think periodic,
So are we adjourned or not?
yeah, we're,
So
We're just checking.
Thank you.
yeah.